don't get me wrong, I really like the Cosmic desktop, and for the most part, it's developing in a pretty positive direction, and for the sake of this video, I will mostly be running it. I might show some stuff under KDE as well, but for the most part, we're going to be on Cosmic today. Now, being the alpha, this is the easiest time to get a change made, and I don't really understand why, but there's a few areas where Cosmic is just making completely unnecessary mistakes, or for whatever reason, a problem that I know would be incredibly simple to address just hasn't been done so. So this is not me saying Cosmic is bad, you shouldn't use Cosmic, but I do want to lay out a couple of things which I just don't really get why they're doing it like this. And I know for a fact there are a couple of people at System76 who do watch my videos. I've spoken to a couple of them, and hopefully this feedback can be heard by somebody, and even if you don't agree with me, you can at least see where I'm coming from with my perspective here. Let's start off with one that continues to baffle me every single time I remember it exists. Cosmic's lack of a full screen key. Now you might think, well, I can full screen a window, I can click this button right here, or I can use the binding that full screens the window. But that is not full screening. That is maximizing. Now, it's entirely up to an application whether it treats maximize and full screen as two different functions. A lot of applications just treat them interchangeably. Firefox is one that does treat them differently. So if I go and maximize the window with the binding, the header bar is still visible here. If instead I press the F11 key, that is what does a full screen. Now my bottom bar is gone as well, and the Firefox window takes up my entire screen. This is not a guarantee for what full screen is going to do though. The one consistent thing that can be said about full screening a window is full screening the window makes it take the full screen. Wow, who would have ever expected that? Now you can full screen windows under Cosmic. I'm literally doing so right now. If you play a game on Cosmic, you can run that in full screen. If you watch a YouTube video, that can take up the full screen. If you have a video player, that can go full screen as well. But when we're doing full screen on Cosmic, it is up to the applications to decide when they want to go full screen. The compositor does not have a say in it. You don't have a generic way to full screen a window. Now, whilst most applications don't care about full screen, one of them really do, and one of them can be a little bit finicky. That being video games. And there are two reasons you might want to go full screen. One, going full screen is going to give you a little bit better performance, and two, variable refresh rate. Now, the problem with video games is sometimes they just like to escape being in full screen. You tab out the window, you go to a different workspace, anything at all. They just, nah, not full screen anymore. And that is exactly why I like having a dedicated full screen button in the compositor. I don't want us to go into the settings to fix it every single time. I just want a quick way to deal with it. We intentionally don't have this key, as exclusive full screen mode is something applications should take themselves and will not behave well with most desktop applications, e.g. it will hide the launcher, /app library, /etc. These should be maximized instead. Then it goes in applications that do have their own thing, like Chrome, like Firefox. Games should also have their own full screen toggle. I am, however, not opposed to have this shortcut in the config file at least. However, it would be unbound by default. This was commented on July 25th, 2024. Following that, there have been a number of comments basically saying, this is something that is really, really desired. I commented on this just the other day, and at this stage, nothing has really changed. And I just don't really understand why you would leave it like this. I understand it not being bound out of the box. That's totally fine. The default way to make a window bigger should not be full screen. It should be maximized. But there are enough use cases where being able to full screen a window in the compositor is incredibly useful. Now, let's move to something that has had a little bit of discussion, but a lot of things just haven't really been addressed yet. that being the sizing of UI elements. So this is a couple of separate issues. This is one about the panel sizing and the icon sizes, and this is one that I made about separate density settings for different parts of Cosmic. So you can, unlike this person seems to think, you can resize the panel. There is a slider here, and I've got my panel set to the smallest size. You cannot make the panel any smaller than this. If you're coming from something like a KDE or GNOME, this is not massive, this is not tiny, this is just an acceptably sized bar. But if you're coming from something like a Sway or an i3, back then I ran a bar half the height of this because the only things in the bar were the workspace I was on and the time and my application tray. I didn't have like launcher icons here, so I could reasonably make it really, really small. Now regarding density settings, this is an option which does way too many things. So under the appearance settings, we have compact, comfortable, and spacious. And every possible thing that can be spaced by pressing these options is controlled by this setting. That also includes desktop icons. So if we go and enable those there, and then we go and change this setting, those are going to be spaced as well. Now, there is going to be an option for changing the spacing of the desktop icons and the size of the desktop icons independently, but I don't want all of the UI elements controlled by this one option. I would like to customize different things where maybe I want the bar here and the sidebar here to be spaced really small. Maybe I want a bit more space in these elements, and maybe I don't want these specific set sizes. Maybe I want something in between spacious and comfortable, and that's going to be controlled by some integer somewhere in the code base. I don't see any reason why this couldn't be a slider, and then, even better, a slider for different parts of the UI. I get having a simple option where this controls everything, but as a more advanced personalization feature, having a way to control this independently honestly would just make things so much nicer. Just bare minimum getting the desktop icons on a separate thing, because that's just bad as it is. I cannot use the desktop icons like this. Granted, I'm not a big fan of desktop icons in the first place, but I want them smaller and I want them a little bit further apart. But having it so everything can be spaced with a slider would be very pleasant. You don't need the same level of customization as something like KDE or GNOME, but I feel like this is just way too limiting. I get why it's like this, because giving users control introduces bugs. And if you have a UX UI vision for the desktop, giving users more control is going to let them do stupid things and introduce stupid bugs. But I think the cost of that is worth what it provides. Now, let's talk about the issue that made me want to make this video: the way that workspaces are handled. Right now, a purely dynamic system. So, as you need new workspaces, right now I have one. If I go and spawn a window, or if you open up a launcher, because this technically counts as a window, we now have a second workspace. If I go to workspace 2, make a window, now we have 3. Go to workspace 3, make a window, now we have 4. If I close this window, go to workspace 2, it's supposed to remove it. But also it's kind of buggy. If I go to workspace 2, remove a window, okay, that removed it. Again, alpha software. It's supposed to remove them as you no longer need them and make them as you need them. And that is what a lot of people want. However, a lot of other people, I'm one of those people, want a static workspace system where it doesn't generate new workspaces. I can say, I want 5 on monitor 1. I want 3 on monitor 2. I want 4 on monitor 3, and that is the set amount of workspaces that exist. Maybe there's an API to add new workspaces if you want to add them, but without doing anything like that, there is a specific number of workspaces. Why might you want this over a dynamic system which has a lot more flexibility? Well, let's say you have a very set workflow. You want your email client to be always on Workspace 3. You want your text editor to be on Workspace 1. You want your, I don't know, Discord or whatever chat application on Workspace 2 on Monitor 2. If you have a specific workspace on specific locations, it makes it very easy to determine where you want things to go. And for some people, having a very organized and very identifiable and specific layout makes things considerably better. I don't think you shouldn't have a dynamic system. I think both static and dynamic should be there. Another thing static lets you do is if you know something is going to be on a specific workspace, a lot of systems give you the option to name those workspaces. So workspace 1 could be code editor, workspace 3 could be email, so on and so forth. Now, of course, there is an open issue about this feature, and I was under the assumption that eventually static would be implemented. But here is a comment from a frequent contributor over on Reddit. A different implementation is planned by having the option to pin workspaces, essentially combining dynamic and static. This is planned for the first release since it's easier to implement and might stay depending on feedback. The only difference between this and static is there's always a trailing empty workspace at the end. So this is the new solution being worked on, or at least the hopefully stopgap solution, because I'm not a fan of this idea, and this is not a static solution. The pin button, this button right here, is in the right bottom corner of each workspace thumbnail preview in the workspace picker and shows on hover. It should be visible in default state on touch devices. Once the button is clicked, it is toggled on. The workspaces that are pinned are not removed even when empty, unlike other dynamic workspaces. There's always an unpinned empty workspace at the end. So this is how that would look. Basically, the idea is you would spawn a window here, spawn a window here, spawn a window here, however many you want, and then go into the workspace overview, which for me right now is very, very laggy. And then there would be a little toggle right here that you could then select that you want it to be pinned. I get this as a simpler solution to temporarily implement. But firstly, it's really weird to do this. Like, you have to, spawn some fake windows just for the sake of choosing a number of workspaces that you want to be static. Secondly, not having a proper static system does get in the way of naming things in the future. Maybe you could, merge the idea of naming and pinning into one thing, and I guess that would work. Maybe, probably. Also, if you don't pin every single one sequentially, there'll still be a dynamic workspace in the middle, which is just weird. And then you just have this extra one at the end, which you don't want to be there. And you might say, oh, it's not that big of a deal. But if you have a set number of workspaces that you work with, and you don't care to work with any more than that, having extra ones can just be really, really annoying, especially if you're the kind of person who accidentally drops windows onto workspaces that you don't mean to move them to. Now, don't get me wrong, I like this as an option, and as an expansion to the dynamic system, this, I think, is really, really cool. But I would like a proper static system where I can specify exactly what I want. Now, the final thing I want to discuss is how Cosmic is handling window decorations, or better yet, not handling them. So, if I open up Alacrity, the window looks like this. If I open up ST, the window looks like this. If, ignore the cursor, that's probably an X-Wayland thing. If I open up PCMan FM, the window looks like this. Okay? If I show you OBS, the window looks like this. If I open up a Firefox window, the window looks like this. Now, do you notice a difference between the GTK windows, the Qt window, and then things that are just not built with a toolkit? These have the cosmic decorations. These do not. Now, it's not because Cosmic does not support server-side decorations. This should be obvious by Alacrity working correctly. So why does Firefox, why does OBS, why does PCMan FM, and a bunch of other applications, which I know for a fact support server-side decorations, not use them on Cosmic? Well, it's because of a really backwards design decision that Cosmic has made with decorations. I reported this issue because this is clearly a bug. Now ignore the closed. This is not closed as completed. This is closed as not planned. Here is a reply from Draculix, otherwise known as Victoria Breckenfield. Toolkit native decorations are expected where supported. Cosmic doesn't force server-side decorations by design. We just provide them as a fallback for applications that either don't have client-side decorations or don't prefer to use them. Now that's a reasonable goal, but here is the problem. There is this broken desktop known as GNOME, which does not support server-side decorations. So GTK and Qt both have fallback client-side decorations for desktops that don't want to use server-side decorations. So Cosmic, by not asking to use server-side decorations, is letting these windows, letting these applications fall back to their client-side decorations instead of using the server-side decorations that they support, that if it advertised these applications could use, they would use it. So as it currently stands, Cosmic is just as much of a decoration mess as GNOME, but for the complete opposite reason. Cosmic supports server-side decorations, it just doesn't tell the applications to use them. The only time it tells them to do so is in applications like Alacrity that don't have decorations, then it will give it to them. But if it has any sort of decorations already, it just will not use them correctly. This is a bug. This is not closed as fixed. This is closed as not planned, and I don't understand why this problem needs to exist. This is just a bug. Now, as I said at the start, I like Cosmic. And being the alpha, this is the easiest time to get things fixed. It's one thing if issues just haven't been worked on yet. That's fine, like, it's annoying, some things haven't been dealt with. But when I see problems which are basically being just said, well, not an issue, you know, it's fine, I need to talk about it, because there is no reason why some of these things need to be like this. And again, for a desktop that is priding itself on building experiences, you can build any sort of experience you want with Cosmic. Having weird limitations like not using decorations correctly just does not make any sense to me. But what do you think? Do you think any of these problems matter, or are there other things in Cosmic which just seem kind of weird? You've reported the problem and it just has not actually been addressed, even though it's very clearly a problem. I'd like to know. So if you liked the video, go like the video. And if you really liked the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, Scribes, LiberaPay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and I really don't think we're getting a beta until at least minimum, probably April.